What's the agenda? Lakshmi, what are we doing?
We are doing the same transferable skills, and today we have Adam here. I think he's a victim of attending previous transferable skills. So, yeah, actually, he's very happy to share what he was doing, how he was doing, and it's not about the session, but personally, I feel like he's a very good mentor. But people who will reach out to him will be definitely benefited technically or any skills perspective, I can say. Thanks so much, Adam, for being so sweet and being so supportive. I'm so sorry. A very good evening to everyone, and yeah, today we have Adam, who is working as an automation lead in iGroups. He will be sharing his experiences, and definitely everyone will be having one or more additional points to learn today from today onwards. Adam, stage is yours. Just
Thank you, Lakshmi, and thank you for that introduction. I am going to dive straight into it because we have a lot of items I want to cover, and I will try and time it well so we have questions, ample time for questions at the end of the session. Everyone is visible on the slide deck, but if you're having any technical issues, point it out in the chat, and I will kick off now. So today's session, we're going to be talking about transferable skills for use in Salesforce Marketing Cloud teams. In reality, these skills are applicable in almost any professional or even personal endeavor that you undertake. But I will be trying to frame the context of how these soft skills can specifically be used in a team, in a marketing cloud team environment, just so you have the most relevance. But I will be deviating a little bit and just talking about skills in general. So this presentation is part of the Trailblazer community groups, and I just want to take a moment here to thank the community and thank Lakshmi and Matt for giving me the opportunity to present, but also just to highlight that it's great that you're taking advantage of resources like this and the community, and the words here I think is more than just buzzwords, because you can when you're just starting out, this can be an excellent way to learn. When you have some skill and some knowledge and expertise, it's even better if you're able to give back and share, which helps others as well as helps yourself through I guess exposure and presentation skills and being able to network, and then ultimately if you can mentor and provide that more senior guidance, you can only benefit yourself and everyone around you. I'll talk a little bit about myself before we jump into the skills, just so you have the context of where I'm coming from. So I'm a marketing automation team leader. I have been for quite a while now. I started off in Marketing Cloud 9 years ago. I'm 40 years old now, so if you're wondering what I did for the other 10 years after school, I actually had a little bit of digital experience before Marketing Cloud from my previous company in a different platform. And prior to that, I was a mature age student coming out of working in warehousing. So it's never too late to start, and it doesn't matter where you're coming from. Skills are transferable, and there are benefits no matter when you start or what previous career you're coming from. I'm a team leader currently, so I don't just focus on hands-on tools, although I still am hands-on the tools. I quite enjoy the team lead aspect of my role, and I started off with not any experience in that regard, and I've developed, what I consider a good set of skills, but I still have a lot to learn. My entire journey has pretty much been focused in the data and automations and journey space. So depending on how you start, you may have exposures to different parts of the platform. But I sort of did not start in the sort of, some people might start in the email build space, deploying and building HTML and items like that. I've been pretty much solely focused on project work and journey and automations, although I have some skills in the other areas. And through my experience, I've worked on too many to count projects and use cases. The next slide will explain a little bit about where I got my exposure. So I'm going to go through this slide relatively quickly as well, just to give context for the people who are might not know much about the industry or the employment opportunities. From my perspective, there's three sort of areas you might end up. There may be some other niche sort of outside cases, but I would hazard that this covers most of the places you would end up working in Marketing Cloud. I've been solely focused on the partner side, so take what I say for Salesforce side and client side with a for what it is. I'll give you my understanding of what might be some of the benefits and considerations for those roles, and also talk a bit about partner side. So obviously Salesforce side, they're the owner of the tool set we're using. They're also a very massive and successful organization. So it would be appealing and provide some good opportunities to be working with Salesforce. Some of the main ones I would think are they actually work on the tools. So if the development of the actual tool itself is something that interests you, that would be a way to go about it. They would also have first access to the training materials and potentially, some of the best training materials. So again, a distinct advantage there. But you may also find, it may be more competitive in that environment, harder. It's one organization versus client side and partner side, which is multiple organizations. So, that's really an isolated sort of use case. There's certainly plenty of opportunities. Client side, we're talking about our organizations that are using the platform to send the communications related to their organization. So think your banks, think any organization, retail organization that's using the platform to send their communications. And some of the considerations you might think for client side are, they have a distinct brand. If it's a brand or a culture, a working culture that you're interested in, then you'll have intimate exposure to that industry. You will also have ownership of the outcomes, as deploying communications. It's not just a once and done or set and forget consideration. There's a lot of strategy and vision that goes into the company's marketing and communication strategies. So on the client side, you may have more exposure to that side of things because it's more relevant for the client to be managing their own vision. And then on the partner side, where I've spent all of my time, although I have, had exposure to client side and Salesforce side, we are supporting clients and working with Salesforce to execute campaigns and projects and support clients using their platform to its full capabilities. And some of the advantages you might find there are a wider range of use cases and exposure to different platforms, configurations, and types of setups. It may be easier. You may find it easier and quicker to learn certain skills at a partner side due to that wider exposure. And you might encounter more people because you're working with many clients and you're working with Salesforce and you're working with the people in your organization. So from a networking perspective and a diversity perspective, you'll get a lot of exposure. So before we jump into all the skills, just a couple of notes. You don't need to be good at any of these skills to be successful, and you certainly don't need to be good at all of them. We all have things that we're good at, and apart from some very rare unicorns, no one is good at everything. So the objective of this presentation is just to see what skills resonate with you and where you think you might be able to add more value in that area, so that you have some awareness of it. But certainly, whatever skills you go into the industry with will develop and grow even further over the course of years. Every skill has its place and adds value to the team. I don't think really any skills are more important than others. So be proud of your strengths and really leverage them to the best of your ability. And we all have areas that we find challenging. So, if I'm talking about something and you feel that is not something you're able to do, at least at this point, then, join the club. That's all of us. We all have areas that we're working on. So bear that in mind. So these are in no particular order. I'm going to start off with working under pressure. I think it's an important one for every industry, life in general, and especially our industry. A well-functioning and well-run team will minimize the amount of unnecessary pressure you have to work under. But the reality is that we work in a complex environment with a lot of different people and styles, different variables, different situations that can occur. And the situations where there is pressure will be present, but that's a good thing. And we just want to learn how we can best work under that pressure, and still sort of achieve our outcomes. So I'll give you some examples. So deadlines is an important one. In our world, we're not developing some massive piece of software that's going to get rolled out in 2 years from now, with a lot of planning and forethought. We do have planning and forethought, but we also have quick turnaround times. We have emails or SMSs that need to be out by a certain date because they have real world dependencies. So a well executed approach to sending out these emails will ensure we have sufficient time, but not always, and we need to meet those deadlines. So if you can operate under that pressure, that will give you an advantage, and also add more value to the outcome you're trying to achieve when you're doing your work. Another way that we can be under pressure is end user impacting defects. So it's a bit of a mouthful, but essentially, where you're going to make mistakes, and someone on your team might make a mistake, the client might make a mistake, and a communication can go out that sends the wrong message for the brand, or could have some unintended consequence because of that mistake. And that will put you under pressure as well. Even after 10 years, I'm sure I haven't made my last mistake, and it's never pleasant, but you do learn to work and better manage when those situations happen. And it is important to keep a cool head, so when things do go wrong, you can best mitigate and address them. And then there's just unexpected situations that occur day to day, interpersonal, project related, client side, someone else in your team, and we just want to keep a cool head in those situations. So it's a skill set you will be exposed to. Next one, communication. So communication is relevant for a lot of different areas. I will try and address the most relevant ones. So if we're thinking about day to day, especially when we're starting out in this field, we want to be clearly understanding information that comes into us, and we want to be clearly communicating information to the people around us. So why might that be? Well, we're gonna receive requirements for our jobs. So being able to read those requirements or listen to the requirements as the client explains them to you. In addition, as your project evolves, being able to communicate how it is progressing, any specific items that you've encountered, taking the initiative to communicate, because it is also a skill to know when you need to give information without being prompted, and coordinating with other people in your team all rely heavily on communication. So it is something that will add a lot of value to your career, and it is something that can evolve over time. So you know, and it's something where there are a lot of resources as well for developing it. And as a little side tip, it might not be as relevant to today's day and age, maybe because I'm a little bit older, but I remember when I started my first office job, I couldn't touch type. And I remember I had some downtime in that first job. And after about 6 months to a year of one finger typing, I had enough, and I set it as my mission to do some touch typing courses. So if you just on the off chance you can't touch type, it's an excellent investment. I can't understate the amount of time and progress I've saved just by being able to type fast. Developing and maintaining relationships. So you'll be working with a very diverse range of people over your career, and communication styles will help with that. You're going to be working with colleagues closely. You're going to be working with clients that has its own considerations with how you communicate with them that will be different to how you communicate with your colleagues. You'll have reporting lines and managers who need critical information, and you'll have new team members, and how you communicate with your new team members will dictate, will again be in a different style, because they, as an example, you will need to explain things in a simpler way so that they can understand it at a reasonable pace. Whereas when you're talking with a more experienced colleague, you might adjust how you communicate because you know, or can assume they have more information than a new team member. We'll talk about collaboration. This is one I'm very passionate about, and I think can be, as important as it is, it can actually be quite difficult. I'll preface this one with an example. So the sort of other side of collaboration is when we're working independently, which is an equally as important soft skill, which is not on this list, but it goes hand in hand. So when we're working independently, we're developing our skill sets, we're executing goals, and we're really focused on that internal focus of driving ourselves forward. And it's an important aspect, and it's critical. You can't collaborate with people if you don't have any self-driven skills of your own. But collaboration is equally, if not more important, because no matter how good you are, you will have gaps in your skills. And if you can collaborate with other people, then you can work with their strengths in hand with your strengths. And between the two of you, or three of you, or 10 of you, or however many people there are on your team, a team that is collaborating well can achieve more than the sum of its parts. I know there are people in my team who have skills in areas far beyond what I have. I've worked with plenty of people who have achieved great sort of pinnacles of success in their areas. And if you can collaborate with those people, then you can learn from them. You can execute tasks with them, and you will have skills that they don't, that they can take advantage of too. But collaboration can be challenging. I want to talk about that briefly. So everyone has different styles of how they work with people. Some styles might not be compatible with yours. Some might take time to work out how best to work with people. Some people might not be good at collaboration yet, and they might still be working on that piece. But I think the main thing is important is that you take the fundamental lesson that working with others is as important as that independent work style. And even though it can be challenging, it's always worthwhile to be supporting that sort of environment in your teams. It's also good for we're talking about internal and external stakeholders as well. So you'll be working with people in your teams. You'll be working with people in different teams within your organization, teams in your client's organization. So developing those skills will add endless amounts of value to your process. We'll go on to analytical and logical mindset. So we are in a technical role. So this sort of mindset is beneficial not just for the technical side. It's also beneficial for the project and process side. To give you an example, you will have problems that you encounter. Every problem can be broken down into components, and having a process and a mindset towards that will be a more efficient way to work through it. The way you can think about it is there are inputs. So an input might be a problem. It might be a requirement. So someone has come to you with a specific outcome that they want in mind. You will first need to work through that and then turn it into an output. So an output is something like a solution. So you've taken the problem, broken it down, come to a solution, and implemented it. And it can also just be as simple as turning requirements into code and processes. So code is the skill you will learn through application, and processes are the Salesforce Marketing Cloud configurable elements that you will learn to implement over time in a logical way to achieve an end-to-end process with a specific outcome in mind. Now we have our last four skills for the presentation. So attention to detail. You'll be working with a lot of detail. You'll be working with hundreds of, if not thousands of different configurations, lots of lines of code, of SQL, project briefs. So having that attention to detail will be important because really all it can take is one or two key missed pieces of information to have an unexpected outcome. So if you have that that sort of mindset that's good at picking up all of those little items, it's a valuable skill, especially for quality assurance checks, and a number of different areas. So when we're talking about attention to detail, we're talking about project requirements, understanding documents, being able to pick up all of the pieces of information in discussions, knowing when to apply your experience, the detailed parts of your experience in a project process, and adhering to all requirements over the course of a project. As you develop your career, the projects may become larger. There may be more components to it. So being able to track all of the little items that are occurring and changing will keep things towards the ideal outcome. But don't be if you are in a situation where there is so much detail that it can be overwhelming, you always have to remember you have in almost all instances, you will have a team of people to help with that. You have multiple people working on a project, from the technical implementation to the account managers to project managers. So the project is almost never 100% reliant on you, especially initially. But the value you bring is that attention to detail and being able to point it out to other people. Project and process management. So I think I mentioned adhering to processes. So in a complex environment, processes ensure that we have the guide rails in place to achieve success. But not every process is perfect. They're almost always a work in progress. So being able to provide feedback of how the process is working is an important part of project and process management. When you first start, it might be fine, and it might be easy to just follow the process because you have many things you are trying to learn. But as you develop your confidence and as you develop your expertise, you do not want to be in a position of complacency with the process. You want to be in a position of questioning and improving the process always, which can be difficult in some situations because there are so many stakeholders involved in a process, and you might not have the leverage or the exposure you need to affect change. But that's part of the skills you develop over time. The important thing is trying to improve the process and keeping it front of mind. Whether you are successful at changing the process is a separate story, but always keep it in mind. But equally as important is understanding when to deviate from the process. Again, no process is perfect, so if you stick to a process that in a situation where it's going to cause a bad outcome, obviously you need to deviate, and part of deviating from a process is identifying when you need to do it. It's communicating with the people around you so they know that you are deviating from that process and why, and making sure that you communicate to all of those stakeholders, and then after the fact or during the fact, we can look at fixing the process or amending the process so it can handle situations like that if needed, or we may just determine it's a once-off situation that's not likely to happen again, and that's why we have the ability to deviate from the process in the first place. Troubleshooting methodologies. So Troubleshooting methodologies, what do I mean by that? So this is more of a technical consideration, but if you did have any coding experience or technical experience from another non-marketing cloud team, or from a previous job, or if you have that inherent skill set, then it is something that will be useful to you. I'll give you 2 examples of troubleshooting methodologies so you know what I'm talking about. There are probably many more that I don't use on a day-to-day basis, but I'll give you an idea of 2 that I definitely do use on a day-to-day basis. One is the process of elimination. So, and I don't think anyone taught me this. I had to just, diving into code. I had no idea what the code was doing. So this is how I ended up working out how to solve problems and understand the code, is isolate, test, and repeat. So you may have a large block of code. If you are trying to work out what is wrong with that code, just by reading it, you are probably going to fail. But a very effective solution is to just take parts of the code, test it, confirm that part is working, and then repeat that test on another part of the code. If you do that on every part of the code, you will find out which part of the code is erroring out. And then you can isolate it even further, breaking it down to even smaller components until you know the exact line of code. And then you can begin the process of trying to fix it. And this is especially useful if there are multiple points of failure in your code, because if you try and test it in its entirety, not always will you have the right feedback to identify exactly where it's erroring out. So that's a methodology that you can find useful for code, but also for processes. If you have for example, if you have an automation and a specific part of it is failing, you can go into that part, if it's an SQL or server-side JavaScript or whatnot, break it down. Once that part of the process is working, you might find something further downstream is broken. We also have the research and testing approach. So this is probably one we're all familiar with. The primary way to execute that is just via an internet search. You'll find with Marketing Cloud, there are many, many resources online to help you at your job. And if you want to be successful and effective, then just learning how to search for information effectively could be one of the best tools available for you to do your job well. You do not need to reinvent the wheel for every problem. Most problems have a solution that already exists. You just need to find it. If it's not in an internet search with the answer ready for you to take advantage of, then Salesforce also have robust documentation. So the technical documentation is there. While it might not give you the exact use case you need to implement, it will give you the underlying information you need to work out what that solution is. But once you have that information, regardless of where you got the information from, you are never going to implement it straight to a live process. You're always going to apply it and test it, confirm that it's working the way you expect it to, and then apply it to your process. And the last one we'll talk about is documentation. So documentation is a part of the job. I know the first time I had to write my first, was it a solution design? I didn't really have any help. I had a sample solution design from an old job, and I was instructed to do one for the new job, which was fun because apart from some assignments at uni, I hadn't really done a proper presentable solution design. But it turns out that quite often, wherever you end up, will have a backlog of very useful documents, and you just need to understand how it was presented historically and replicate that for your own use case and situation. And it can be applied effectively across multiple areas. But in an ideal situation, when you're learning documentation, you will probably also have the opportunity for support from your team. I know in my team, what I like to do is I impose them in the same situation that I started, which was just, here's an example, here's what I expect in the outcome, and let them have a go at it. But then probably the next level of support for that is take the time with your team members to see what they have produced, and then run them through any areas they might have missed. Explain to them what they could have added, what they might need to remove, and why. So hopefully you find yourself in a situation where you're getting the same support. But if not, don't fret. Learning through doing is 70% of the job, and in fact, it can be, for a lot of people, the best way to learn, because reading bunches of theory and samples and historic works is just not as fun as doing the job yourself. So as long as you have those sample resources, it's not as hard as you think it might be. One more note on documentation. I'm just checking the time. I think we're on track. Documentation is not just about producing documents. It's about being able to interpret them as well. So what sort of documents might you encounter? So typically a job will have a brief or a requirements document. It will have supporting documents that will help you achieve the outcome. You might need to go through historic communications, through emails. Documentation is prevalent in all aspects of our work. So on the last slide, I just want to do a sense check. Lakshmi, how we're going for question time.
Adam, whenever you are finished, then we can just open for the questions.
Okay, I'll run through this last slide.
Sure thing.
So I wanted to give some practical examples of what you might encounter in the workforce. So what we call ad hoc work, or it can be called batch and blast, or there might be a few other names. But when I say ad hoc work, I'm talking about one-off execution of a communication. So the client needs to get out an email to a set of data by this date. We need to build the email, we need to load the data, we need to set up our dependencies, and we need to make sure it goes out correctly. So what are some soft skills that we can apply to that? If we have good attention to detail, then when we're working through building the email, we are focusing on our code, our HTML. We're looking at our client's copy to see if they've put any typos. We're looking at the structure of the email, if there are any imperfections. We're looking at email rendering across different, 10, 20 different email clients. How does it look on all of these different clients? It all requires attention to detail. If you're still developing that skill, it's very easy to just scan through 20 different email clients and high level for the sake of moving quickly. But if you can focus in on every one, you're going to produce a better, more consistently better looking email for your clients. Ad hoc work, so can work under pressure. Ad hoc work is very deadline dependent, and before it gets to you, 5 other people have worked on it, having to do their thing, and they're behind schedule. So you might find that your deadline is not as generous as you would like. So ad hoc work can be a very pressure sensitive environment. Uh, when I say pressure, I mean you have to produce accurate results in a short amount of time. And when you're trying to do quality work with no time, it can be stressful. But stress management is a skill that you can develop and can be applied to this role. And troubleshooting methodologies, working through testing, is it rendering correctly? If not, why? Isolate, fix, repeat the test, and so forth. Projects. So projects are more of your automations and journeys. They take longer to complete, and they have more moving parts. It might be something you end up doing a year or 2 or 3 into your career. It benefits from an analytical and logical mindset because unlike, so while everything can benefit from an analytical and logical mindset, in a project, you have more considerations around data, how different parts of the process connect to each other, different use cases that can result in different outcomes, and being able to work through situations like that helps with a mindset to match. Project and process management. I've worked in plenty of projects where there was not much project and process management. I've also worked in ones with very good project and process management. Definitely the latter is better. There can be advantages to working with a very loose process, but there are significant disadvantages as well. In a complex project, you want some guide rails to keep things accurate, and solution documentation, solution designs, quoting documents, requirements documents. The projects are more complicated, so they require more documentation. The last item I'm going to talk about is leadership. So if you find yourself in a position or with an inclination to lead, it is a important part of a team, and it is probably one of the sort of contributing roles to the team that would potentially benefit the most from these sorts of soft skills. You need to be able to collaborate. A leader is not a position that that assigns work and then watches the results. The leadership position is there to support the team. You'll be providing, hands-on technical support. You'll be providing support through your experience in different situations that you've encountered, and communicating not only to individuals but to multiple people at once, and also fostering the environment of collaboration, because it's not always intrinsically there. You need to lead by example with collaboration, because especially in technical roles, it can be easy for a technical person to just isolate into their work and focus on getting their skills up, getting their code tight, getting their outcomes through the door. But as I've highlighted previously, collaboration, if you can rely on your team to support you with the skills you don't know, as well as get support from more senior members on a technical issue you might not have been exposed to yet, or provide that support to someone who doesn't have it. All of these skills are again important for a leader. Can work under pressure. So as a leader, you are responsible for your team's work. If someone on your team makes a mistake, then there are a number of considerations that impact you, because in a high pressure mistake driven situation, the pressure falls to you to go in and identify why did the mistake happen. It's not necessarily human error. So it could be human error, but what training did that person have? What training did you give them? What process did you put in place for them to prevent them from making that mistake? And then if the process wasn't in place, how do you manage the stakeholders around you? How do you communicate with your clients? How do you communicate with the person so that they feel comfortable learning from the mistake, and so that the team can learn from the mistake? All of those situations can cause pressure. So you can benefit from being able to operate like that. And then the last one is communication. You in the leadership role, you'll be doing more talking than you were previously. I certainly know that I've had to increase the amount of words I say on a day-to-day basis over the years, and that that comes with time. But obviously, if you are a good communicator, then you can leverage that in any position, but especially for leadership. Great. So I think we got through everything. I think every item on this list you could probably do a whole presentation on. So if that felt like a bit of a whirlwind tour through it, just bear in mind that is the high level. That's the high level my take on these skills. Over time and through different experiences and through self-education, there is a lot you can do to further enhance all of these skills, and they're all equally as valuable as your technical skills. Hand in hand, they make a good combination to have those hands-on skills as well as the ability to work effectively within a team. Hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I'm happy to hand this over for questions. If Lakshmi, if you want to read any out, I'm not seeing the screen at the moment. I've got slide deck on both screens.
Thank you so much, Adam. I do have many questions or some key takeaways, but before that, I just would like to ask Matt if he has anything to say on this one. Matt?
Yeah, no, I've got a couple of things to share, but I think we've got a few people on the call. So Lakshmi, can you start opening up the microphones and make everyone a presenter so they can just ask questions, because I think that'd be such a good thing to do. I think I've got a couple of notes here, like about a dozen. Thanks, Adam, for all the awesome information.
Matt, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. So, yeah, just going back through what you shared, and we're working with enterprise software. It's about a team. And you also talked about unicorns. There's no such thing as a unicorn that can do anything well. Everything that we all bring is of value. So don't discount yourself. Your authentic self is what makes it work. Diversity in this environment makes it work. Nobody can just make it work by themselves. You mentioned about pressure. Pressure is good. We all make mistakes. We could have a session about what marketing cloud mistake have you made that has had the most impact. I'm sure we've come up with some really interesting stories. A mistake is a problem if you make it more than once. I think I heard somebody say. And the other thing about what we do is we set up marketing applications. Yeah, we try and get it right. They're not going to be there in a couple of years' time. And we're working in a cadence which is pretty quick. So give yourself, don't expect too much of yourself, I think is where I'm going there. When you're communicating, communicate concisely, honestly, and if you don't understand anything, just ask for clarification. That's one of the worst things I've ever seen people not do, is just ask for more information. How do I do what you've asked me? And you'll find that more than likely whoever's got a task, they'll break it down. They'll help you through it. Collaboration. If you haven't read The Tipping Point, suggest you do. It talks about mavens, salespeople, and connectors. And I believe that we're all connectors. We distribute and collect info, and that's what we do, and that's what we have to do. The other people, the salespersons and the mavens, you might think of the mavens as the unicorns and the salespersons as the salespersons, but yeah, us as people that are in the system doing the work, we're the connectors. We're connecting stuff up. We're just trying to work it out. Another note I made just as we were listening through, it's always overwhelming. It is always overwhelming. I get overwhelmed with it. I think everyone gets overwhelmed with it. What's this problem that we're going to do next? But that's our job. And just break it down and continue to break it down again. So just take the big picture and, okay, what are the components and what are their subcomponents, and just keep breaking it down. Just a couple of more notes. Process change is good. Yeah, be a trailblazer. Yeah, get out there and talk about how things can change. It may not make any change, but at least you're thinking about it and people will see that. Troubleshooting. Adam, you mentioned about troubleshooting. That goes back to breaking the problem down again, taking parts out and working out what works and what doesn't work. Documentation. See, I did listen to this, writing lots of notes. It's best just to document just as much as needed. So documentation doesn't need to be screen grabs and everything else. It just needs to be as much as you need to do to make it make sense in the future. And remember that you're most likely documenting for yourself. So you'll come back to this job in 12 months' time. How did I do that? How did it make sense? Like Adam said, I've done so many jobs I can't remember. In the meantime, how do I make sense of this again? So you're documenting for yourself. So when you're documenting, don't think about documenting for somebody else. Think about how to make it make sense. I've got two more notes, but it really goes back to the question that just asked before. What are your thoughts? What are your key takeaways? Lakshmi, what's your key takeaway? And what,
I have so many, but yeah, I just wanted to ask one question to Adam straightly. When when you said the troubleshooting method or breaking down the problem, when you don't know what the problem is, how can you break it down to smaller things? Or how do you find the consequences when you are working on the SFMC environment for the first time? How can you think in a broader sense? Adam? Oops.
maybe I can have a go just while we're waiting for Adam to come back.
Yep.
If you don't understand the big picture, sometimes pulling parts out of a complex system can help you understand that big picture. I think Adam's coming back now, but maybe that was the thought there.
Am I audible?
Visible as well.
And visible. Hello, everyone. Yes, thanks for jumping in, Matt, and thanks for asking the question, Lakshmi. So my understanding of that question is, how do you begin breaking down a problem where you have no idea and no starting point? Maybe the isolate and fix solution is only helpful. So if I went to someone and said, "Oh, this JavaScript's not working, fix it," and they said, "Well, I've never looked at JavaScript before," then that's an unrealistic expectation for me to put on that person. So I would approach that in two different ways. I would push it back to my leader, and I would say, I'm happy to do the effort and put the due diligence and time to resolve this issue, but I don't know where to get started. Can you point me in the right direction? Can you give me an example. Can you give me half an hour of your time to show me the start of it, and then I will take over from there. So that is one solution, which can be difficult because it's often challenging to, I say to use the words pushback, which can seem a bit confrontational, but you need to be able to strategically and professionally raise with the people around you when you are out of your depth. But then the second part to that, I'll say, is there are times where you will be out of your depth and you don't have the option or luxury of support through no one's sort of fault. Maybe that's not something anyone knows. And in those situations, it's perfectly fine to do a best effort attempt. And what I do in those situations is I set the expectations of the people around me. So my manager wants me to do something that I've never done before and I have no idea how to do it. I'll say, I'm happy to have a go. I'm going to need 10 hours and I expect a 50% success rate. So that's where I end up with it, because it's to Matt's point, it's the honest and authentic answer. There are some people who are very successful in just saying yes and using that pressure to convert it into a successful outcome, but maybe that's not the solution for everyone.
I think that's 10% of everyone can get that right. The rest of us mere mortals. We have to ask, we have to plan, and even play the plan back. Okay, then you've asked me to do this. How do I make it make sense? I'll break it down and play that breakdown back and say, look, these are the things. Does that make sense to you? And that's part of that collaboration process. So much better to do that than say yes and just be scratching your head about how I'm going to do it tomorrow. I know somebody famous once said, say yes and work it out later, but it doesn't always work. Totally agree.
Makes sense. I just have one more question on the documentation. Do we have any templates or for storing the marketing cloud related work done?
So it's an interesting question. I don't know if there's any centralized resources that are available, because you'll find most of the documentation that you're using day to day is proprietary company documents that are not allowed and shouldn't be shared outside the organization. But there are probably generalized technical documents you could get from online resources that could be adapted to suit this purpose. But I've never had to use that. In every team I've worked on, there's always been some legacy document I can leverage for sure.
I might just share a couple of thoughts, just from a process point of view. Start with the customer. Start with what the customer wants. What's their use story? And work out what's really important to them. And that becomes the use story acceptance criteria. And that's a place that we need to help guide a customer through. It's workshopping as a solution architect. But the next step that we do with that is we turn it into a technical use story. Okay, so the customer wants to do this at a high level. How do we implement this? And what's that technical use story? And this starts to talk about how we might do it on the platform. And then the acceptance criteria on that technical use story will become the things that we'll test. And they go back to our end testing. So these days, I guess that's sort of an agile methodology. It's how we tend to do things. And when we're playing back how we need to be able to play back current state and future state. But if we're going to play back future state, we need to work out what current state is. So and ultimately, it's always about data flow. How does data flow through the system? Because we might be in our marketing cloud and it's all about messaging, but it's actually all about data flow. So it's sort of, if we unwind it, we get this input. What happens to that input? How does it get translated into the next thing? So however you do that, it doesn't matter. It's just important to be able to talk about that so that people understand that concept. Just some thoughts.
Yeah, that end-to-end concept is certainly so. Yeah, understanding every end-to-end, like how everything is working end-to-end, is one thing, but then all the, it ties back into everything else. Being able to document it, or being able to talk about it, being able to teach it, and to your point, the customer focused point of view. Because how many times have we as professionals built something end to end, but we're, especially in the early days, just following a requirement or an outcome and not actually thinking about the customer impact, or what is the optimal end-to-end experience, not just what you've been briefed or what the requirement is.
I guess it goes back to the audience of the documentation. The customer's got different perspective. They don't care about the detail. They just want to see how it's going to work, and they want to be confident. It's about what's the word for it? Perception. They want to have confidence in what you're doing. And you need to be able to portray that confidence. And that's one type of documentation, which is more user focused. And that's the user story, I guess. But the other part of it is that documentation that you've got to go back to and read yourself in 12 months' time. I guess that's the technical stuff. And however you sort that out, I guess it's up to you. It just needs to make sense. Sequence diagrams. What else are there? Process. Oh, look, it's just so many options. There's just so many different styles of documentation.
Maybe that's
a topic.
Maybe that's a good segue. Because I just want to say as well, I understand an environment like this, asking questions and engaging, especially if you're new, can be difficult. So I just want to extend, if there's any follow-up questions that you want to ask, feel free to ask not only me but anyone on this call, because I'm sure we'd be happy to provide any clarification, either in the context of transferable skills or in the wider context of the community skills and the tool set.
That's awesome. Anybody has any questions? I don't see anything in the direct messages or Q&A. Someone has one.
I think Sai just posted one.
Yep.
I'll read it out. Hi, Adam. I'm so glad to be in the session and grateful to hear the excellent words of knowledge. Thank you, Sai. The only question Sai has is how we stay up to date with Marketing Cloud documentation and new updates like AI and ChatGPT. It will be helpful in the future. So I think I think probably one of the best places to stay up to date on the new features, to stay up to date on features overall for the refined sort of official explanation, would be the trails on Trailhead, which, while not all of them go into extensive detail on implementation, it will give you an awareness of the item on a high level, because realistically you are not going to, if you try and stay up to date on everything, then you are not you won't be applying everything, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's good to have a high level awareness of the technologies that are present and upcoming, but you will get the most value by going deep into a skill or a tool that you can apply over a sustained period of time. So I would say Trails, probably following Salesforce on platforms. I'm sure Matt will have some input on. Matt's good at keeping his finger on the pulse, I imagine. So do you have any other suggestions for that?
Look, whenever I put a question into Google about Marketing Cloud, I always say Site Stack Exchange. And everyone's already asked the question on Stack Exchange, and it's all there. Just in terms of AI and ChatGPT, yep, they're things that we need to be aware of, but they're just like 3% of everything. That's just about predicting things and recommending things. But as people on the platform, we need to be able to do things too, and it's understanding the detail. And you've got to find out that detail. What is that API payload? How does this thing work? There's just so many of those things. Stack Exchange is your friend. Go there.
Yeah, exactly. Stack Exchange will have detail. It depends on what you need to know when. Because if we really want to think about it as well, if you are selling the product or consulting on the product is different to working on the product. So having a high level understanding, if you're selling the product, is probably more useful, and staying up to date on all the upcoming technologies and all of the current sort of things that are buzzing in the ecosystem. But it's if you're looking to be successful, I would be more interested in picking one or a few things and developing a deep skill set. Really, the outcome you want to be going for is adding value, and you can add the most value by developing a strong skill in a couple of things and growing from there, because not everyone can put the time and energy and persistence to get really good at something, and that's the value that you're ultimately going to bring. I think we might be done.
I think we're running out of questions, but I've only got one last question.
Yes, I will.
Lakshmi, when are you doing your presentation?
No, I didn't expect this question. No, I'm just going through all the previous sessions, and I just want to add one thing to Sai Krishna's question or inquiry. In order to keep yourself updated, just be in touch with the community group leaders or the communities, right? Because from this community, I learned so many things. From each individual, I had so many learnings, and even when I was just trying to go through previous transferable skills today morning, and I was wondering why did I forget all these things. I was going through Jess rules, Jess's transferable skills, and he was saying so many things which I wanted to practice. I wanted to remind myself, but yeah, I was not doing them practically. But today you have added so many things, Adam, for sure. Um, I will try to make sure I will remind myself every day, at least one of them.
And realistically, and this is for everyone on the call, not just Lakshmi, but the amount of information so the way I like to process information now, and when I take these lessons is, it's impossible to take on board and apply everything you learn, but you'll be surprised where just planting the seed of that idea, even if you don't use it for years, maybe one day, you'll encounter some problem in the future. And I vaguely remember, someone mentioned that years ago, and then you have at least that starting point that you can refresh yourself. So to everyone on the call, don't be overwhelmed by the amount of knowledge and skills and things. I think we listed 8 different soft skills. Remember that, just if you're going to remember one thing, remember the warning slide at the start. You don't need to be good at everything. You don't really need to be good at anything. You just have to have the right attitude to want to learn.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add one more last thing. You said the collaboration, right? That's the key thing to go ahead and go forward and move forward, and then that builds the gap between every other skills what you have shared among the slides. So just be confident and don't hesitate to ask questions to people. They are very nice, because I asked so many stupid questions to Matt and Adam these days, but still they encouraged me a lot to ask more. That's why I still keep on asking questions. But definitely I will share my transferable skills, Matt. Hopefully it will be a long session, not just 30 minutes. I will try to, and the other thing I wanted to add is like we just need to, improve our communication, because I know so many people who are attending these communication skills are not having English as their primary language. I was one of them, and I still suffer to communicate what I wanted to say. When my lead or my supervisor asks me a question, I know the answer, but I don't know how to communicate so that they will understand it. So just don't hesitate that you wanted to tell them, right? It need not be perfectly grammatically correct, but you just try attempting and telling them that I want to answer it and I know something about this. Just share whatever you know. That's what I feel will bridge the gap between knowing and unknowing. That's what I feel.
I might add something to that. I struggle, and my first language is English, and I struggle with English. And sometimes I just open my mouth and wonder what's going to come out next. And sometimes you got to have that sort of don't get too anxious about what you're going to say. People look at you. People understand, and just if you're being you and you're just trying to work it out, that's okay.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, Lakshmi, you're going to do well, because if you are learning to master the language, but you're too afraid to use the language, you are never going to master it. The only way to master it is to let those words come out and listen to the words come in.
Yeah. I try to teach my son that don't afraid to ask questions. When I tell him doing that, I can't stop myself doing that, right? So I just wanted to.
It's all about your authentic you. You can't get away from that one.
Yeah. And any more questions from the audience? And the special audience, Matt. Do you have any more? Me? You? I'm sorry, you.
No, I've got no more.
Okay. Yeah, can we close the session then? Let me see. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Adam. And when you have anything to share technically on Marketing Cloud side, we are happy to host you again. And yeah, definitely I will learn something very new from you for sure. And yeah, Matt, I will definitely plan my transferable skills.
Awesome. Looking forward
to it.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah, bye.